So today, if you didn't read the title, we will be addressing the absolute, without a doubt, #1 reason for loose steering. So you heard right, in today's Tech Tuesday, we will be talking about loose steering and how to fix it. Now, before we get into that, we should really define what loose steering is so that we're all on the same ground here. Most people would define it as a lot of play when you're driving down the road. It doesn't feel solid, or it takes a while to engage. It doesn't engage right away as you're steering. My Bronco, those are all symptoms that I'm having right now. And you have to keep in mind that this is a common problem in early Ford Broncos because it's 50-year-old steering components. So most of the time this is an easy fix, but before we dive into the fix, we need to address the most common problem behind loose steering, and that is a loose steering box. Now let me preface this by saying that 90% of the time customers bring their rigs in with symptoms of loose steering, it's almost always a loose steering box. Now your rig could be part of the 10% with other problems such as a bad tie rod or bad ball joints, but the majority of the time you're going to want to start right here. What I'm about to show you is hands down the #1 place you want to start when diagnosing loose steering. If your steering box is loose on the frame, adjusting or replacing or fixing anything else isn't going to solve the problem in the long run. So to diagnose whether your steering box is loose on the frame, you could just hop down there and start tightening everything down. But if you want to see with your own eyes what is happening with your steering box while you're driving down the road, then you're gonna need a friend to help you out. Okay, so helping me out today is the little bro Russ. Now what Russ is gonna do is he's gonna rock the steering wheel back and forth. Now what you want to do, you or your friend, is you want to take a look down at the steering box on the frame. And what you see may shock you. Now most of the time there isn't actually anything wrong with your old steering box. But I know what some of you guys are saying. Well, I replaced this and I replaced that, I replaced the old steering box and my rig drove 10 times better. And you're right, it did. But when you think about it, it's because you tightened that new box onto the frame. But give it a few months of driving, maybe a couple trails, and that steering box will be right back to working its way off the frame. Now, once you diagnose whether or not this is your problem, you can get to fixing it. Now, you would think that red Loctite and locking nuts and locking washers and grade 8 everything, the whole shebang, you'd think that that would do the trick in keeping your steering box stationary on the frame. And that's what I thought. I did all of that, but occasionally the reason your steering box is loosening up on the frame is because your frame is actually being crushed underneath the pressure and the torque of your steering box. When you think about it, your steering box is constantly being yanked back and forth, and that skinny stock frame is taking all of that weight, and so that tends to crush and weaken the frame. Now for some of you, tightening the mess out of your steering box will do the trick. Just check your frame. If it's in good condition, then use the red Loctite, the locking nuts, the locking washers, all of that good stuff, and you should be fine. But if your frame is as jacked up as mine, then you're going to want to replate the frame. So without further ado, I'm going to show you guys how to do that, hopefully. Let's run through a few of the tools you may need. You'll need a tape measure, a knife, a marker, a flathead screwdriver, an assortment of wrenches, an Allen wrench, an impact drill if you have one, a wire brush or a disc sander, a drill and drill bits, a couple of sockets and a ratchet, and you may need a hammer. It's always a good idea to have a hammer. So your first job is to remove the steering box. In order to do that, you have to start by removing the steering shaft from the box. Once that's off, begin removing the drag link from the pitman arm. Use a hammer or pitman arm puller or whatever means you have to get the drag link off. You could leave the drag link connected and take the pitman arm off the box instead. That's up to you. Once you have the drag link off, you can unbolt the 3 steering box bolts. After those are out, it's a good idea to put a drip pan underneath the rig because next you're going to pull the hoses. I only pulled one hose and was able to move the steering box out of the way enough to still work. You may need to pull both in order to have working room. Just use your judgment. Once the hoses are pulled, go ahead and get the steering box out of the way, either by pulling it all the way out or by placing it out of the way like I did. Next, you want to give your frame a fairly decent clean. You're going to be welding, so the cleaner the frame, the easier that job will be. Now, just to quickly show the damage to my frame, you can see how cracked and deformed it has become over the years. This is all stuff that we're hoping to fix. So continue to deep clean the frame with your wire brush and or disc sander until you start seeing clean, bare metal. Once you have a pretty clean frame, start mocking up cardboard for the plating that you'll be making. Do this for both sides. Once you have cardboard templates, trace them out on a chunk of steel. I'm using 1/4 inch steel, but you can use whatever you feel comfortable with. After those are traced out, go ahead and cut those puppies out. Make sure you use proper protection. After you cut the plates, mock both sides up to make sure there are no tweaks you need to do. In my case, because the frame was so bent, I decided to use a little persuasion to conform the plate better to the frame, so there wasn't as big of a gap when I went to weld. After the plates are dialed into your liking, it's time to mark the plate for the 3 holes. Clamp the driver's side plate down where you want it. Make sure it's clamped down tight, then run a marker of some sort through the other side in a circular motion to mark your 3 holes. Take the plate back off and drill through the 3 marks you just made. Now you want to make sure that you're as accurate as possible. Once those holes are drilled, test fit your piece with the 3 bolts. If you're lucky, all 3 will go in no problem, but if you're like me, you'll have the 1 bolt that doesn't want to go where it's supposed to. We interrupt this broadcast to say that we're gonna come back tomorrow. This has been a crazy day. We got a lot done, but this is all project. If you guys could see all the hiccups we've run into, but that's just what it takes when you're doing custom stuff. So we'll be back tomorrow. We'll catch you guys later. All right, day 2. Let's jump right back where we left off. Okay, so getting those bolts to go through in all 3 holes. The easiest way I found to enlarge the holes without another drill bit was using a carbide burr bit. Although only 1 hole was off, I went ahead and took a little bit of material out of each of the holes so I could get the bolts through more easily at the install phase. Real quick guys, I'm going to interrupt that beautiful narration to just kind of give you guys some on the ground, I don't know, just the hiccups and stuff we're actually running into. So if you look at this bolt, come in here, come check it out. You can see how warped and wavy it is, and that just kind of highlights what's actually going on when you're turning the steering wheel when this thing is loose. This is a grade 8 bolt. Like that's some stuff right there. But it's getting bent and going crazy, and that's the force and stuff that's being put into that steering box and onto that frame. So when you take that into consideration, you definitely want these things to be tight. I'm gonna have to find some new bolts, but that's just I just kind of wanted to show you that so I could highlight what we're actually talking about here. But with that said, we're gonna get back to work with the beautiful narration. Great intro, other me. Make sure you keep that in mind, guys. So once you can run all 3 bolts through the holes with relative ease, I would suggest taking the plate back off one more time and sanding it down to bare metal around the edges for a cleaner weld. Also, before you weld, go ahead and give one last wipe down to the area you will be welding. Once the area is clean, throw your plate up, run your bolts all the way through, use your old washer and nut to tighten the plate down into the frame. Make sure to crank it down. And now the fun begins. All you're going to do here is tack weld the plate in place, remove the bolts once you're done. Next up, start dialing in the other side. I had to do the same thing on the other side of the frame and conform the plate. I also had to sand down a little of the frame because of how jacked it was. Once you're happy with the frame and plate relationship, clamp your plate into the frame and run a drill through the other side to mark where you need to drill your 3 holes. You can use a marker again, but I found this to be more accurate. Drill your initial holes and do another test fit. Mark any adjustments that need to be made and make it happen. After your last test fit, clean the edges to bare metal and bolt that puppy onto the frame. Once those are cranked down, tack weld the plate in place. You can now remove the nuts and bolts if you want, but what I did was leave old grade 5 bolts in the holes so that the holes would still be lined up in case any heat warping occurred from the welding. Once you reach this point, the time has come. Let's freaking weld, I guess. Because you're throwing so much heat into your frame, make sure you give a little bit of time for the frame to cool off between each side. Other than that, go to town. Okay, so definitely not the prettiest welds. I know, I get it, looks like puke and makes me want to puke, but it'll hold, and that's all that matters. That's what sanders and grinders are for. Now that the plates are installed, clean it one more time, throw a can of paint on it, and you're almost done. Alright guys, so it is day 3 of this little escapade here. We've plated the frame, we've painted it, a straight beef down there, so all we have left to do now is put the steering box on, put all of the components back together, probably put a little bit of power steering in the box, and we're good to go. So let's get to wrenching, let's finish up this project today. I didn't actually expect it to take this long, it's just, you know, it's wild horses. We got a lot of stuff going on here. We're gonna go ahead and finish this project so I can get this puppy back on the road. You heard right, just get your box bolted back up and reattach all the components such as hoses and steering shafts and anything else you unbolted during the process. Next up, before you reconnect the drag link, find the center of your steering box. If you're not sure how to do that, watch this video, then come back and finish up the process. Now that my steering box is centered, my drag link needs to be adjusted. If you don't have an adjustable drag link and you're running into this problem, you probably want to look into getting one so you don't throw your steering out of whack. Lucky for you, I know a place that sells them. Once you've readjusted your drag link and tightened it to the pitman arm, you are done. The last thing to do would be to do the steering test again with your friend and see how solid that steering box is against the frame. Alright, so now that we've got everything tightened up and dialed in, we're just going to do a quick test drive, make sure nothing falls apart, and then we'll come back here and wrap the video up. Woo-hoo! Alright guys, so that just about wraps up this Tech Tuesday. We hope it serves to give you guys just a little bit of insight on what you need to do if you are diagnosing any kind of steering problems. You always want to start at the steering box on the frame. If your steering issues are fixed with something as easy as tightening up a few bolts on the frame, then you've saved yourself a ton of money. And at Wild Horses, if that's all it takes to fix your problem is telling you to tighten up a few bolts versus spending a chunk load of money, then that's what we're going to do, because we want to help you guys solve the problem rather than just sell you parts. I mean, that's what we're here for, guys. We're here to help you solve the problems, help with all of your tech problems and situations and things that come up, because they come up with these 50-year-old trucks. That's just what happens. And if you don't have the answer, make sure you give us a call. That's what these Tech Tuesdays are for, is to help you guys hopefully dial in a few more of the different things that you're working on, maybe give you guys some creative ideas for some stuff that you're running into on your own. But anyways, guys, that's a wrap to this video. If you guys want to see more of the Pitbull in action, go ahead and follow my personal account on Instagram, Mitch Creel. I'll be posting all of the memories and stuff that I'm making with this thing. I'm not going to post it on this channel so much because that's not exactly what this channel is about. But go ahead and follow me on Instagram if you've been following the Pitbull. We're having all kinds of fun, because I haven't even told you guys yet, but I've been driving this thing for like the past 3 weeks, and I've been sharing it all on Instagram, so make sure you check it out. But anyways, guys, you guys are here for Wild Horses, so we're gonna wrap this video up. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already for more Tech Tuesdays, for more Bronco breakdowns and Bronco stories, and just everything Bronco. We're trying to cover it all, so make sure you guys stay tuned. And yeah, as always, with all of that being said, we will see you guys out there on the trail. Peace! Wow, 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 wow.